thanks everybody who's had the chance to introduce themselves in the chat. It's great to see so many people here this afternoon. For those of you who don't know me, I'm John Galt from Education Scotland, and delighted to be part of the session today. Thanks very much as well for those of you who took part in the wee Menti just as a warm-up. So certainly if you're like me, you might have been thinking about the holidays that you haven't been able to get over the last year or so. So that led to the question that you can see there: where was the farthest place from the west of Scotland you've ever been? And it's interesting to see that we're quite a far-travelled bunch in our backgrounds there, looking at there. There's no prize for the furthest away because my geography is not good enough to tell you which one of those is furthest away. But certainly looks as if people have travelled in their time, and let's hope at some point we all get to do that again. I'm going to pass over to Jennifer Nichol from East Renfrewshire Council, and Jennifer's going to welcome us to today's session and tell us a bit about what's coming up now. So over to you, Jennifer. I'll put the slide up just as I'm passing over.
Great. Thank you, John. Welcome, everyone. It's great to see lots of emails. Apologies from me, probably. It feels like I've been sending a lot. So it's great to actually have our West Alliance ESOL webinar starting now, finally. So really just to sort of run over what to expect today, and the agenda is there. But first of all, I suppose, was just to give you a little bit of the background. The West CLD Alliance had carried out a workforce survey last year, and ESOL and adult literacies, in particular for adult learning, came out as areas of interest for professional learning. And so we've also had adult literacies sessions, and hopefully more to come there. And obviously this is the start of the ESOL professional development opportunity. The survey that you all filled out also gave us quite a lot of information as well when you were registering for this webinar. And it was great to see so many people interested in opportunities to come together, to share practice and to learn from one another. So there'll be an evaluation form at the end, and really looking for more detail, I suppose, on that. A lot of people also said they'd be happy to share practice, they'd be happy to maybe help facilitate a session, and just to come along as well, which is the most important part. There were quite a lot of areas actually in terms of the ones that were suggested for professional learning, opportunities to share practice, digital, remote learning, online assessments and ILPs, which we'll touch on today, cultural differences within ESOL learning groups, working with refugees. It was actually quite high across the board, so there's a lot of interest there and definitely a lot of scope, I think, for opportunities moving forward. I have to mention the partnership work, though, that has, we've worked together with John Galt and Laura Starkey from Education Scotland to organise these sessions. So thanks to John and Laura, and I think this might be one of Laura's last sessions with the West Alliance. So I just want to say thank you to Laura for everything that you've done over the past few years. And we will see you, I know, at national events and opportunities there. And also wanted to say thanks as well, myself, Isabel Sinclair from Renfrewshire Council, and also Eleanor Rafferty from North Lanarkshire Council have taken the lead on this at the moment. So it's very much has been a partnership approach to this. I don't think it would be possible otherwise. I think moving forward, there are opportunities if other people want to get involved or take more of a lead role. That will be flexible because I know everyone is extremely busy, but there are definitely opportunities to get involved moving forward and to help to shape these opportunities. I think that's really important to note, and we want everyone's input on that. So today's session, the presentations are going to be recorded by Education Scotland, and they'll be available on the Education Scotland YouTube channel, which is a fantastic resource if you haven't visited already. And that's great because a lot of people were interested but couldn't manage along to this session today, so it means that they won't miss out. If you don't want to be on camera, I'm sure most of it is the slides rather than our faces, but just to let you know if you wanted to turn your camera off for that. Today's session we've got some guest speakers, so I just want to say thank you to Michelle from North Lanarkshire, who's going to be sharing some practice on ILPs, etc. Pauline from the Tecla, thank you so much for coming along and being part of this today, and also to Laura and Dara as well from Education Scotland, who are going to be delivering inputs as well. And we'll have an opportunity to share practice and just have those important discussions which seem to be at the top of everyone's list in terms of what's important for professional learning at the moment. So I think that's everything. During the presentations, if you can mute your microphones and add your questions in the chat, and we'll see how we get on with time, if we've got time to have any discussions at the end of any of the presentations, but it's quite a packed agenda. So I think we'll definitely be using the chat function primarily for that. And that's me, I think. Thank you.
Thanks, Jennifer. Thanks, Jennifer. Michelle, can I ask you then to come in and tell us a bit about individual learning plans and engaging learners online? So Michelle Osterk from North Lanarkshire, over to you.
Hi. Oh, voice has gone on mute for so long. Hi, can you hear me okay? Yes, sorry, I've been having a few problems with my headphones this morning. Lovely to see so many familiar faces as well. It was quite reassuring to see that I didn't know so many people that were here today. So it'll be quite good to catch up with them if we get time later on and share how we have been surviving these COVID dramas that we've been dealing with. Yes, today I'm going to do really just share with you what we've been focusing on in North Lanarkshire through our ESOL and the Science Resettlement Scheme in relation to the ESOL provision that's been available to the mainstream learners, also integrating with the Syrian learners. So I'll just share this with you now. Fingers crossed it can. I'll just. Someone confirm that you can you all see that okay?
Yeah.
Yeah,
yes, we can see it.
Yeah. At North Lanarkshire, this year we piloted, it's the first time that we've done them this year, where Adult Achievement Awards, with a view to looking at how learners can record and reflect on the learning that they're involved in. And that's one of the things that I'm going to talk to you today and how that's been going with ESOL learners. So it is the same content as an ILP, so how learners are planning, recording and reflecting on their learning journeys. And then looking at the sort of the backdrop of how we have managed to engage learners online. And that, as I'm sure everyone's had the same experience, it's changed shape several times in the course of the last year to 14, 15 months. that change dictated by how our learners are able to access provision, how we were able to offer provision, and the depth of all the devices and things that we're all juggling to try and make it a quality and enjoyable experience for everyone, which I'm sure we've all had challenges with at times. I'm trying to keep the words to a minimum so that you're not sort of reading things off the screen. This is just a selection here to show some of the things that we have learners have used as part of their Adult Achievement Awards. We've done a lot of short group learning plans where the group have decided a topic that the learners wanted to find out about, or information they wanted to learn, or particular area of skills, language skills or vocabulary that they wanted to focus on practicing or building up. And we then use them to do mini topics, mini projects within their groups. And they also had the option to have an individual element within that if there's something particular that they wanted to focus on, as well as what they were doing as a group. Variety of things that we've had online to keep learners engaged. We have had provision online, so we've had classes at different levels, which I'll give you a wee bit of detail later, but also keeping the variety. So short topics that learners were interested in that they identified, and then a variety of different ESOL cafes where they could come on and practice informally. They followed a general structure of a topic, a small quiz, and then the learners sharing photographs and then talking about, you know, something personal for them or their information. And I had to include one of the fantastic breakfast coffee trays that one of our Syrian learners shared online, and it was so impressive that coffee was so well presented, and it was great to see so many of the different photographs that learners did share online of what they were doing at home. And it was really good because it helped learners to feel connected to each other and involved in something, rather than, you know, as people were quite isolated at home. So in regards to engaging learners online, a big part of that, as I've mentioned, we tried to use selected topics. So there was always a bit of a change. So you'd maybe do a topic for a month or 2 months, and then they're able to reflect on that, record that learning, and then maybe select a new topic based on what the learners wanted to do. That helped to keep learners motivated and focused on particular things. One of the topics that we did do was in response to learners. Lots of the refugee learners were having the ability to vote for the first time this year, and we did a mini project on them learning about what their rights were, how they could vote, what was involved in the voting process, how does the system work in this country, and also a great input from the Refugee Council and Electoral Commission, good resources for that mini project as well, which went really well. We did have main provision online, so there were sort of standard classes at 4 different levels, and learners were offered 3 sessions every week. And we did try to keep 3 sessions available to every learner, because 1 session a week for 1 hour, it was really a bit of a drop in the ocean. So really we did try and keep learners engaged by offering them several sessions, up to 3 at varying lengths every week, at a level that was suitable for them. And I think a big focus, as I'm sure you've all experienced yourselves, it was trying to build that link between sitting on a phone initially, then if they'd had an access of a resource through Connecting Communities, a laptop or a tablet. But it was still very hard to recreate a really good classroom experience or a good learning environment without having something that could complement what the learners were doing at home. So we did supply learners with paper copies. Now, it could have been paper copies of the SQA unit that they were doing the support materials as a skeleton resource, but we did also pilot some digital resources and specific resources targeted for the beginners, because the beginners, I think, were our most challenging groups to keep the beginners engaged online and make it an enjoyable quality experience. So the resources really were a strong element in keeping the provision that the learners were attending as engaging as possible, so that they had something they could use at home, they could be writing with at home, and also able to then link in with the same resource online. And as I said, the quality of the resources really is essential. Initially, we did have photocopies of resources that were sent out, and we did then try to find as many digital versions of the same resource so the learners are able to see a quality version on screen and then have their own paper resource. And it was quite noticeable, the difference in the level of enthusiasm and engagement when learners got their own book and it matched online and you could actually share a sound file, because I know one of the difficulties we've had was actually if you're trying to share audio on Teams and learners are listening on their phones, it was all quite patchy at times. So the quality of the resource and what the learners could experience at home really made a difference to the level of engagement. One of the things that we did pilot this year to look at the recording, reflecting, planning of learners were the Adult Achievement Awards, and these are provided by Newbattle Abbey College. We'll just give you some brief information. I'm not sure how familiar people, maybe you're all very familiar with them, I'm not sure. This was the first time that we'd used them this year. Really what the AAAs are about, the triple A's as they're often called. So it gives learners the opportunity to gain a national certificate for the learning they've undertaken. And the focus of an Adult Achievement Award is exactly the same as learners would be focusing in their ILP or the group learning plan. It's looking at what learning they're going to do or what they're currently engaging in, why they're engaging in that particular learning, why are they doing it. As they're going along at the end of each session or at the end of a week of sessions, reflecting on what they've actually done and what have they learned from that, and then looking to take the learning forward, so planning for their future goals and where they want to go next. So they do cover up to 6 levels, from level 2 SCQF to level 6. We found that most of our learners fell, I think most level 2, level 3. We are also piloting it with, we've got a volunteer tutor training online at the moment, and they've opted to do an Adult Achievement Award at level 4. So we've been able to cover 3 of the 4 levels that have been selected by learners. And it can be done online, so it can all be learners, you can give them their booklet online and then they can type in and they can email it back to you, or you can share it. But there's also, they can do it in writing, so we were able to print off and distribute the booklets and the materials to the learners so they can record at home as much as they would in their ILP or their group ILP. They can, if need be, complete it in writing with a scribe. We had some learners, but we've all had to be very imaginative in the last year, and I think there's even been some people recording on the doorstep and then filling it in for the learners at a later date. And learners can, and this did appeal to quite a few of the ESOL learners, they can actually record their learning, record themselves on their phones. Now learners are all very generally equipped with phones where they can do voice recordings, and they can then record their learning, record what they've done that day, and then have it written down. They can write it down themselves, or they can send in the voice file, and you can put it in as well. So it gives them an opportunity to focus on writing or also on speaking. And what the learner actually needs to do, they record their learning as they would in a learning plan. They record what they're doing. They consider the skills, the strengths and knowledge that they have gained. A good reflective part that they're prompted to think about, okay, what have you actually gained? What are you going to use this learning for? Why are you learning this particular thing? And plan for future learning, so include future goals of what they want to focus on next. And the 2 practical things that the learners complete, they complete a learner guide. The learner guide it's basically they record their learning as they go along, and there are some prompts within that to help guide them. And there's also a good support, there's lots of examples of previously completed learner guides, so it gives them an idea of the kind of things they could be writing. And then when they've completed their learner guide, the My Vote project that we did, for example, that was for 4 weeks. So the learners completed their learner guide over the 4 weeks, and then at the end of the 4 weeks, they used the learner guide to reflect back on the previous 4 weeks learning, and then use that to complete their final reflective journal. And there is quite a lot of overlap. Often a lot of what they've said in the learner guide is just repeated in the reflective journal, but they've maybe had a chance to look at the 4 weeks for the My Voting project. They got a chance to look at the 4 weeks of what they had been focusing on, the activities they'd done, how they'd done them, who'd helped them, what had they liked, what had they not liked, what had they learned, how was that going to be useful for them, and then sort of summarise that. And it really was reflective because they thought back over what they had done. It made them look back over their old notes, maybe redraft some of their sentences in writing, because they can really, in the learner guide, they can just fill in. We had some learners who just used pictures, bullet points, keywords. They don't, in the learner guide, even have to do sentences, so they can really record in any way that they like. But for the reflective journal, they are then writing it into some sentences. Some of the prompts that exist in this was for a level 3. One of the questions was, describe the learning you've been involved in. And this is some of the responses that came back from the learners. Again, most of them, I think, on this page, all based around the My Vote project. So they've just explained they worked on a project called My Vote. Why did they do it? Understand the election coming in May. They needed to know the words used to talk about the elections. It was on the papers. They were getting lots of material through their doors, and bombarded with a lot of literature about it as well. So they really wanted to know, what was going on and how could they find a way through all this information to effectively use their vote. Explain what you learned in general from this experience. So this is the look back in the learning that they've done and what did they learn generally about it. And they've learned about the different parties in the UK and their colours. It's like their football teams, but even the being able to focus on the icons or the emblems that each party uses, and the colour, it help the learners to really focus on, oh, well, if I see it in yellow, I know it's this party. If it's red, it's blue. So that gave them something to identify with quite quickly for sifting out information. I don't know how many times I was asked, but who? Just tell us, Michelle, who should we vote for? And you were constantly flicking back to the slide saying, it's illegal for anyone to tell you that. But it did spark quite a lot of discussion. And no, I didn't point anyone in any particular direction about who to vote for. Why did you take part in the activity which led to your learning? So it did question the learners and make them think, well, why am I doing this? I'm not just doing it because my ESOL teachers told me to do it, or because that's what my group's doing. It was really getting them to try and think, well, why? Why are you taking part in this? Why is this going to be useful for you? Is this going to be useful for you? And we did have a wee bit of it. It was with my ESOL group. But I did learn more vocabulary about politics in Scotland. So they did get keywords like ballot station, poll station, ballot paper, and that was often enough to help them identify at least the process. Explains what they've turned. Yeah, I think that's all of that. And other things that they were prompted that they responded on was list 3 strengths you demonstrated during your learning activity. So it was quite good to make them think, well, 3 things that you actually were quite proud of, that you found that you could do, that you were good at. I was good at listening and understanding the videos. I think some of the learners were quite surprised that they could understand the videos as well as they could. Some of them became really good spokespersons for their other learners and other friends in their own community to explain the voting process. Several of the learners commented on how they enjoyed being able to I think 1 or 2 did enjoy lording over their colleagues saying, well, I know this and you don't you even know that you're registered? But they did like to say, well, I was able to pass this information on to other members of my family or other friends that didn't really know about this. So there was actually quite a few of them commented that they enjoyed being able to pass that information on. Identifying future goals, which is key for any learning plan. group learning plan, and then also if these goals are individual. And so some of them identified being able to leave a message at school on the phone. They wanted to improve their speaking when they're speaking to people. Then we looked at trying to tailor that into broader opportunities, because the learning, obviously it's a much bigger picture. How are they interacting with other services? How are they then interacting with their community or other services that are available? So it was trying to encourage them to think about further learning that might interest you out with directly an ESOL class. Oh, sorry, I wasn't meaning to finish that one quite so quickly. Just go back there. Excuse me a second, sorry. Yeah. So they could join the conversation cafe every week, encouraging them to look. We are offering SQA certification this year, so we're trying to plan their assessments now. So we have encouraged them to try the online practice assessments and look at the websites and use some of the audio material at home. Trying to link in with other services that are offered in the council, bookbug stories online. Some of our family learning team were doing bookbug stories for parents, and we did try and encourage the ESOL learners to think about joining one of them. And then generally, once they'd finished the voting project, which other project would they like to do that would help them to improve and use their English and maybe learn more about life in Scotland as well. So I think that's me, and I managed to stick to my time quite well. I've not gone over as well.
Great. Thanks, Michelle. That was fantastic.
Stop sharing that. Yeah, I think I'm still sharing.
Thanks very much. As Jennifer said at the beginning, folks, we know that learning planning online can be a challenging thing to get to grips with. So I certainly found Michelle's input there really practical, and hopefully you found it useful. Remember, if you've got any questions for Michelle, stick them in the chat, and there'll also be an opportunity to reflect on what we've heard from the inputs when we get into our group discussion. But that was a great bit of example of engaging learners online and on the doorstep by the sounds of things, Michelle.
Well, sometimes at the start, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm pleased to hear you weren't misusing your power and telling people how to vote in the election as well.
Tempting, no, it's tempting.
I'm sure it was. Okay, thanks. Folks, we're going to move on. We're delighted to have Pauline Blake-Johnson with us today. Pauline's from the National Association of Teaching English and Other Community Languages to Adults. And Pauline's going to give us a bit of an input on professional learning and signpost us to some useful resources. So, Michelle, are you there? I can see your slides. That's great.
Yes, I'm here. Sorry, I was just waiting for you to finish there. Thank you. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yep, great. Okay, thank you. I'll get started. So yes, thank you very much for the opportunity to come along today and talk about trying to help you be signposted towards some ESOL resources. There are many familiar faces in the chat today. I'm just going to do that again. There we go. Many familiar faces in the chat today, so I apologise if you've heard me share the same information. Hopefully there'll be some people here who haven't heard what NATECLA Scotland does, and that will help you in your search, the eternal search for resources. So, as I said, I currently chair the NATECLA Scotland, which is a branch, the Scottish branch, of the biggest ESOL teaching association in the UK. So NATECLA is a wide teaching association. It is very prolific down south in England, and as a branch we have been operating since 2016, although there has been a branch historically in the past in Scotland. So we are a committee. Now, one of the myths I wish to dispel that we are constantly come up against is that NATECLA is not just for college lecturers. It is for anybody who practices ESOL in whatever capacity that is, right from a volunteer, a practitioner, a tutor, a teacher, manager, etc. I'm very proud to say that my committee who run NATECLA Scotland have a very diverse background, college, local authorities, third sector, and representation from SQA ESOL on it as well. I mean, fundamentally, Netecla Scotland is about bringing people who practice ESOL together, but also supporting you in that practice as well, in whatever way it is that you need, whether it's hearing about other people's practice, whether it's sharing resources and training, whatever it is, that's really what we're here to do for you. How do we do this then? In quite a few ways, and I have to say that while the challenges of the last year or all of our lockdowns have presented to us, has been really difficult in terms of teaching, it's actually allowed Netecla Scotland to really take a step back and look at how we support practitioners out there in a different way, and it's opened up a lot of ways that we have done that. So since the last time I shared information about Netecla Scotland, we've actually completely revamped our website, and I'm going to share a little bit more detail about that in a second. So we do have a website and we do use Twitter, and these are our main holding information places and also sharing information from other areas too. We have launched what effectively is a webinar series, but under the terms of Netecla, we can't call them a webinar series because they have a professional webinar series they run. So they're called online forums, effectively an opportunity for practitioners to come together, share practice, learn about practice somewhere else, hear experienced practitioners speak. We hold them monthly, and the best part is they're free. We also have an annual conference. We've been lucky and had until last year. They've been face-to-face, and let's face it, it's always great to come together. We always hold it in November each year. Last year was online. This year we have our fingers crossed for another face-to-face, but who knows what that will be like, so just keep your eyes peeled. Our presenters, we work very hard when we recruit our presenters to ensure that they are coming from a wide variety of ESOL landscapes as well. So we don't just have only college lecturers speaking. We try to ensure our programme is as diverse as possible so that all people are attracted, all practitioners are attracted to what our presenters have to offer. So this year it's the 6th of November, so please pop it in your diaries and I hope to see some of you there. We have also launched a YouTube channel in lockdown, which has been really good fun. Our tagline for this is bite-sized blethers about all things ESOL, and it really has become a lovely opportunity to meet practitioners and to interview them and share what they're doing. We have one that is about to go up, and it's about a manager managing their department through COVID, which has been really interesting. So we're looking for content for that at all times. So I implore any of you out there that would maybe like to have a chat, a blether with me on Zoom one day, record it and we can fling it up on the YouTube channel. It's been great fun to do. So our website, this really has become a huge repository for resources and information, and I'm hoping that this is what will really help you today, because all of the work that we have on our website is for the most part contextualised to Scotland and Scotland's practice. So this should, we hope, become a really great resource for people who are practicing ESOL in Scotland. So you can see that I have highlighted various tabs. So this is, the top part is my landing page, and you can see that we now have a resources page that has links to packs and toolkits, books, publications, resources, websites, links, or you name it. It is a very big page. This is added to regularly. We usually advertise if we've tidied anything up or added anything to it. So, you know, as part of our website, you can actually on the home page scroll down to the right and follow us. So if we do change anything on the website, you would get a message into your inbox about it. We also have a links page when we include policy documents, links to other associations, links to examining publishing bodies and organisations working in ESOL. Again, updated regularly. We have added in of late a tab for courses. So this is training courses. Some are free some are paid for. None of this means we endorse them. It just means this is a collection of courses that are available for people who teach in English language teaching or within ESOL. We have always had a volunteer tutor page, which includes both Scotland and NATECLA's supporting statements about volunteers, their frameworks, and also some resources, website and ideas, particularly for volunteer tutors. And we also have a dedicated ESOL literacies page now, which again, support packs, training, information, links and resources in there. So that is hopefully the sort of main bulk of our resources that you may find useful. In other ways that we celebrate the incredible work that ESOL does around Scotland, because it really is incredible, is we have a section called Stories Around Scotland. This is where we share little stories or anecdotes or successes about people's work, and when we ask people to write for it, they often get a little bit flummoxed. Oh, I can't possibly write something, but I urge you to go on and have a look, because they're really anecdotal pieces. I want to hear the voice of the tutor or the student or the volunteer. It's not about writing academically, it's about us showing the work that we do in the best way possible. In the same vein, we have an Esol Aficionados page where we celebrate ESOL practitioners. So we have profiles of people who have worked in ESOL, and we explore their backgrounds, how they get onto the job that they're doing at the moment. Everybody has a colleague who's incredible, and I would love to hear about them and showcase them on our ESOL Aficionados page. So please do get in touch if you either have a story or a colleague that you want to celebrate. We also have a teacher trainer page, and this is to support anyone who trains ESOL practitioners. This is more of an ELT teacher trainers page, but we're working hard to include specific ESOL information in there as well. So I was very aware of time, and I'm very aware that when you're running a day like today, what you want is a tidbit to take away. And I also recognise that you need to go and have a look at my website, our website, I beg your pardon, our website, and explore it. So really, what do I want from you today? Follow us for free, particularly the website. I'm proud to say that it's taken us years to get to the stage that we have a website that really is chock-a-block, full of information and resources for practitioners. I'd love it if you considered sharing the work you do in our Stories Around Scotland series. I really, really feel passionately about sharing the work that everybody does. Everyone has a great story to tell about the things they've been up to, particularly in the last year, and I'd be delighted to be able to share that. Maybe you would like to share what you do as a future online forum or one of our conference presenters. We're really keen that people get an opportunity to showcase what they do as well on a wider scale. For example, our last online forum, I was delighted that we had the Dizzy Heights of Scott Thornbury join our delegate panel, which, if you work in the world of VLT, is one of the biggest publishers of all time. So we do reach a wide audience, and what is great is we get consistent feedback about, my goodness, Scotland really knows what it's doing when it comes to ESOL, which is fantastic. Maybe you would like to consider coming onto committee. Maybe this is something you'd like to add into your own professional development, coming onto a national committee to work in the field of ESOL, and I'm always delighted to speak to somebody who would like to be interested in that. Now, following NATECLA Scotland, you can do all of that for free, but I would urge you to consider becoming a member of NATECLA as a whole. I do believe thoroughly in being connected to professional membership, and that does include people who work in a CLD environment. This is not just about people working in a college sector, which I think is a myth. So, do you think I've missed something, or we're missing something in the offers that we have and the things that we do? Is there something that you would actually like to maybe see on our website? Or perhaps you've got something specific you'd like to find out about that perhaps I haven't touched on today. So if any of those 3 questions at the top, pop whatever it is into the chat, include your contact details if we don't know each other, and I promise that I'll help you, because that fundamentally is what Untitled Scotland is here to do. Always ready for chat, always ready for help. So thank you very much, everybody. And if you have any questions about signposting, I'm absolutely delighted to help you. I have given you a very Scottish context today, but we do have wider connections that I can utilise both within the UK and abroad internationally through NATECLA and through ITEFL, for example. So thank you very much for your time. It's always great to come along and share what Untitled Scotland does. And I hope to see you at one of our events very soon. Thank you.
Thanks, Pauline. That was really useful. And folks, I think we're really lucky to have such a vibrant branch of the National Association in Scotland. And Pauline gave us loads of ideas there of information and resources to check out on the NATECLA website. And also, I think I would agree with her in terms of the offers there to get involved. I'm sure there's a good few Esol Aficionados already on the call here, or if not on the call, then the people that you work with. So please make the links with Pauline as she suggested there. So I don't see any specific questions there, Pauline, just lots of people saying thanks very much for a great input and that you're doing an amazing job. So really grateful that you could join us today. Thanks very much. Folks, we'll move on, and the next part of our programme is my 2 colleagues from Education Scotland. First, Laura Starkey, and Laura's going to give us a bit of a grounding when we talk about the Community Learning and Development National Competencies and how they link to ESOL practice. So pass over to yourself, Laura.
Yeah, thanks, John. Right, I'll just do what everybody does. I'll just get my presentation up. Yeah, so the group that was basically putting this together talked to me about the fact that everybody on this call is all from slightly different backgrounds. So there's people on this call who will have CLD degrees from their starting and beginning, or you may have an ESOL qualification that you've started from. So what was kind of really important, I think, from the group that was putting this together is to have a little bit of conversation, a bit of chat about CLD and the kind of underpinnings of CLD, which I think everybody on the call will relate to. So hopefully some of this, again, it might not be necessarily completely new to you, but it's also, I think, a point in time after everything that everybody's been through with COVID, just to actually kind of remind yourselves of what underpins our practice and where these come from. So what we have, and I'm sure you're all aware of the CLD Standards Council for Scotland that's there, and it does have a kind of the fundamental values that underpin CLD across all of its settings. And again, many of you will know I'm heavily involved in lots of different areas around adult learning, whether it's ESOL or adult literacies or community-based adult learning, and really, or family learning as well. And what I think is key is that you see all of the values and competencies across every area. And I mean, I should mention youth work as well, because they underpin youth work too. So it's really important that we see and we understand what these are. Hopefully everybody on this call is also signed up as a member or an associate member. So at this point, I just want to make sure, just in case anybody isn't, that you can join as a member if you have a qualifying degree. It potentially may be that you don't have a qualifying degree, and you can sign up as an associate member, including volunteers, so long as you're basically showing that you're signing up to these values, the values and ethics and the competencies that underpin what they are, which I'm sure all of you will do. So ESOL is kind of highly embedded within the kind of equalities approach and the equalities area within CLD and the values that are there. And I think what's really been shown by both of the presentations before me as well is around that working collaboratively, working in partnership with other people, what we do, linking with the communities, and I think that's really been shown and talked about a little bit with Michelle and with Pauline too. And obviously there's promotion of lifelong learning, because we want all of us are learning. I know I learn every day. So that's kind of important. What I'm going to do is just very briefly is just talk over some of the competencies and just see how these link with ESOL specifically. So hopefully, and if you haven't, this is the Competencies Wheel that's there that you can see on the Standards Council website. I'm not going to go into every single area that's there. I'm just going to do a few of them because I'd be talking forever otherwise. But I'm sure you'll see everything that you do and everything that you deliver within ESOL in each of these, you know, organising and managing your resources and evaluating. They're all absolutely there and underpin the kind of practice that we do. So if I go into some of these in a little bit of detail in the ESOL context, knowing and understanding the community we work, I think, is really key because, you know, within ESOL, and, you know, as mentioned there, we've got the wider ESOL offer that we have, as well as specific ESOL work around Syrian refugees, for instance. So it's really important you understand both the learners and where they're coming from culturally and background. You know, the Syrian refugees, you know, for instance, you'll all be aware, you know, you have to take into account, for instance, large things about the war-torn country they've come from. So it's important that we're understanding that kind of background of where are the, you know, are people, for instance, economic migrants, what does that kind of look like? But then also what kind of community are they then moving into? Where have they moved to in Scotland and what does that look like? So again, is it a rural? I know I'm doing this for the West Coast, but we still have these issues around rurality, you know, in the West. Certainly if learners have been placed out in quite village or isolated areas, unlike those who are maybe in, you know, inner city in Glasgow. And I think what those communities look like can be hugely different. So we can go, for instance, areas in Glasgow where there's huge cultural diversity to maybe, you know, other areas where there's almost none, and indeed they might be the only ESOL learners within that area. So I think it's important that we understand those aspects around the community, and that kind of then influences what the work that we do. You know, I think within ESOL as well, and I think this is where, you know, many of you have been involved in this kind of work, is those kind of cultural differences as well, and that can kind of underpin things that we do, learning that you undertake to ensure that people are understanding things and processes that are around them. You know, I think schools are a really big one. You know, if people are coming from other countries, they don't necessarily understand our school system, how it works, expectations, whether that's just expectations on telling a school that a child's off sick, or telling a school that a child's going, you know, for instance, back, you know, to another country. Well, not during COVID, they're not, but, you know, in other circumstances when they're going home, for instance, to visit family, and ensuring that they understand those simple, what we consider simple and everyday tasks, but are very, very different and difficult for ESOL learners. I think that's really, really key, that you kind of understand both the learners and also where they're living at, and these, you know, things that we've brought up and that are just ingrained in us that we understand. And I guess that wider community then is looking at who else is within the community, who else can you link up with that's maybe appropriate, and whether those learners want to link with them, you know, is again up to the individual learners. Certainly not something that we would decide for them, but just about making sure that both the learners have the information that they need, and understand where they can get information from as well in future. And I think that's really, really key. So building and maintaining relationships, you know, I think, you know, Michelle, within her presentation, you know, obviously really talks about that in terms of the voting and wanting a bit of influence in terms of who they chose. But I think that's really key when we're working with ESOL learners, and we're, you know, obviously there's real difficulties, particularly with lower level learners, around what their language is. So we need to make sure that we've got the, you know, really good relationships with them, so that we can support them and engage in wider activities, kind of referencing that idea that, you know, one group, for instance, a week is not necessarily enough, and indeed if we can build and maintain learning, particularly informal learning that happens in the wider community, the importance of what that can do for learning and sustaining links within the community, and, you know, really and helping people to settle, so that we're thinking of those kind of socially, you know, so that learners aren't socially isolated. That's what I'm trying to say, is so that we're breaking down those barriers and ensuring that they're becoming embedded within their own communities. I know that I've certainly seen during COVID great examples of that, and, you know, I know that Michelle did her presentation, but I was aware that they had learners who went out into the community to help with the humanitarian efforts early in last year in 2020, and, you know, and I think that's really important, you know, for ESOL learners, that they feel part of where they live now. And I think part of the role that we have within CLD ESOL is ensuring those links and seeing how we can support people to forge them, to create them, to grow them, and feel confident that they're a part of the community in which they live in now. So I think that's a really, really important, and our relationship with them is really key within that. So providing learning and development in a range of context again, I think that's really key, and you'll all be involved in lots and lots of different areas within this. I mean, I think the health and wellbeing aspect following COVID is absolutely huge now, and I think, certainly within practice I've heard of is some learners who are accessing learning digitally, particularly women who have quoted, this was actually over in the East Coast in Edinburgh, but have said that they're actually engaging in learning that they would never have engaged in had it not been offered digitally. So I think even as we're moving forward and coming out, that there is some advantages from digital offering a digital learning, as well as ensuring though that learners, and I think probably coming back, and many of you will have experience in this as well, as learners who are really quite isolated and potentially previously, even before COVID, didn't necessarily leave their house an awful lot except for maybe their ESOL class. And so that importance of then the health and wellbeing and how that impacts going forward to get people kind of moving again, get them out of their house, get them engaging in things, get them walking, because ultimately we all know as well the links between health and wellbeing and learning. People need to be in a good place mentally and have their wellbeing in place for them to learn, and I'm sure you'll all be really aware of that, and particularly those who've been working with refugees. So there's all those different areas that we can link in. I think it's really key that we look at what CLD ESOL can do around understanding of Scotland, for instance, about understanding what the country looks like, what examples of learning that people can get involved in. I'm well aware, again, this is obviously in the West, and I think there's really good practice around, for instance, ensuring learners are aware that museums are free to go into, the likes of the Kelvin Grove, for instance, and seeing what you can do to support learners to access this kind of wider offer, which you've got to think a lot of them won't necessarily know are available, won't feel confident entering buildings like that potentially because they can seem quite intimidating. So what can we do around supporting them to access them, on just making them aware of what else is out there? And indeed, lots of people will know I'm huge on my outdoor exploits, whether it's going up a hill or to a loch. So again, just making sure that they're aware of Scotland as a country in terms of if they do have access to a car, the beauty that Loch Lomond is only up the road from Glasgow, or areas within the West Coast. So just making sure that those other opportunities, that people have an awareness and embedding them into the learning that you have, I think is really key too. The last one on there is obviously digital, and you've all been doing that over the last year. So I think it's still kind of thinking though, what does that mean going forward? And whether that, for instance, is then linking with wider community-based adult learning. I know in Glasgow, there's a lot of linkage done across ESOL and getting ESOL learners on the digital even before COVID. So these kind of things I think are just things to think about and think how you're going to grow them in future. So the last one for me is just really important too, is that I think CLD, we almost take for granted the fact that we do work in partnership with other people and that we have collaborative working embedded into our practice. I think that's something that you should always think about, that actually that's quite unique to CLD, and think about what it is you do in that area, what's happened following COVID, and what can you now grow. There's huge opportunities around working in partnership and collaboration with other people, whether that's in the virtual environment, for instance. I know that there's an offer through the likes of the museums or the likes of STEM ambassadors, which again we can give people more information in those areas to link up with groups. So thinking about that, and how can you grow your offer by looking at the other support places that are out there that may be relevant to the learners that you're working with, and how that can then grow. The ones at the bottom there, around the kind of money advice, really thinking again the impacts of poverty, and I think this is really key for a lot of our ESOL learners, particularly following COVID as well, and the impacts that have. Is there support that can be done around the kind of welfare rights, monetary areas, financial literacy supports that are there? are our ESOL learners aware of mental health information and mental health support that's available to them? For instance, is that being passed on, and are they aware that they can go to those, get that support for free? So there's plenty of organisations, that I'm aware of. We can certainly share information on the health and wellbeing wakelet that we have that has a variety of different organisations on there. Again, that learners can use. So I think just thinking of those impacts of COVID and thinking, well, what do our learners need and what do they need in future, and what information might they not have that we maybe need to support them with. And that's not necessarily doing a huge learning outcome on it, but it's just making sure that they've got relevant information that might affect their lives going forward. And at that point, I'm going to stop, and I'll stop sharing, and I think it's Dara's up next with the national picture.
Hi folks, thank you for letting me come along today. Hang on, just bear with me a moment where I'm not very good at the whole multitasking thing. I'm just trying to put my screen up. Hang on. It's really good actually to come along today. Thank you. Just while this is hopefully popping up, it'll hopefully pop up. It's telling me it's coming up in a minute. My name's Dara McDonald, and I work with Laura and John in the Education Scotland CLD team. But I cover the South West region. I cover the 3 Ayrshires and Dumfries and Galloway. But as someone who lives and previously worked in the West, this does feel a bit like coming home. So it's lovely today. It's lovely to hear about your practice, which I'll obviously be taking away, Michelle, all those examples to share with the South West today. So thank you very much. Now, I do realise as well that you've obviously been we've been here for a while and going through some fantastic presentations. So what I'm going to try and do is cut this as short as possible, and just know that you'll get all the slides and all the links with anything that I'm going to share with you as we go through. Okay, so hang on. So I've been asked today to come along and just give you a really brief overview of the policy context. It's going to probably be even briefer than normal because, as most of you will know, the policy is in what we'd probably call a state of transition at the moment. As you can see, we'll send you, you get all of these links, but the ESOL strategy, which was due for renewal last year, along with the adult learning strategy and the youth work strategy, like everything else, was temporarily put on hold last year for other COVID priorities, as it was in many of our services. But work on the strategies resumed earlier this year, and even before, what I'd like to, I suppose, point out is the adult learning strategy, in particular, the amount of consultation that was undertaken with ESOL learners, ESOL practitioners. And that's even before the pandemic, and actually in the sessions that they've had since the policy refresh is renewed this year, was actually phenomenal, and has been, recognised as just unique and sector leading within the government. And also, maybe just to flag up, I know a lot of you will have supported your learners to take part in the adult learning survey, but I think it was, the last I'd heard, it was 16% of the feedback actually came from ESOL learners, which is phenomenal when you consider what proportion of adult learners overall in Scotland are ESOL. To have that 16% voice there is fantastic. So where we are at the moment is the draft strategy. So the proposal at the moment is that the adult learning strategy will be the overarching strategy for all aspects of adult learning, and that includes ESOL. And what that's going to look like, that draft strategy is out at the moment for consultation. And I know that many of you, through your day jobs, as it were, will be feeding back into that at the moment, whether that's through, if you're in the CLD sector, through national bodies like CLIDMS or COSLA, and, if you're from the college sector, obviously through the college networks. For those of you who come along to, we'll get onto this in a moment, our Eso Leads Network, you've also got an opportunity to feed back specifically with that ESOL lens through David Cullen on our group, who's representing our ESOL Leads group, and collating and gathering back. So You'll have lots of opportunities to see it and to feed back what that national strategy will look like. So the plan at the moment is that feedback will be collated and shared back with our Scottish Government colleagues by the end of June. And they're still aiming on working and having the actual new adult learning strategy launched later on this year. Might also be worth pointing out that I am focusing on adult learning strategy here, given the group that I'm with. But just as a reminder that the new youth work strategy that's due out later this year will also touch on ESOL, because it's up to the age of 25. So there'll be lots of focus in the coming year. In the background of the strategy launch, there's a lot of strategies, policies that touch on ESOL that I'm sure you're familiar with, but aren't exclusively around ESOL. So, for example, the New Scots strategy, and I know a lot of you will have been involved in the last, pulling your hair out your head possibly. I know we certainly have in the Southwest over the last few weeks trying to get your AMIF bids collated in time, because the New Scots strategy came with some funding for the first time. And I think it was about 16 topics, and there was like 3 or 4 of them were specifically around ESOL provision, ESOL support and wider ESOL programmes. So again, just that link on and with other strategies that ESOL touches, it's come up in all the presentations so far with Laura and Michelle with the voting and all the work that fantastic work that Pauline and her team do, that it's, that it straddles so much more than just that one policy. So a bit about what does this actually mean for us in terms of Education Scotland. You're doing a lot of work at the moment with John and Laura around your regional work, and as are we. And I just wanted to stop for a moment as well. You've had that policy context, you've had the CLD competencies and values, but where does Education Scotland, where do we link in with all of this? And I realise this slide is really small, so I've blown up some of it, and I'm just going to pinpoint a couple of things that I wanted to share with you that we're doing specifically in Education Scotland around that policy, as well as linking in with national organisations such as Pauline and TECLA and regional groups such as yourself. Like many of you, Education Scotland had a corporate plan that was due to go out to 2022, and we still have that, but the last year really has been a stop the bus, reassess, how do we support renewal and recovery in the sector. So it might be something that you want to go away and have a look at, that we've also got a recovery year plan. And if plans aren't your thing, you see this in the slide, that plan, we do also have a plan on a page. But it also just shows you how we've been spending this year as a real priority. What I've flagged up there are our themes, the areas that we've been focusing on in the last year, our improvement teams, that hopefully you'll start to see how it joins up with the work, as I say, you've been doing with John and Laura, and maybe some of our national webinars that you've attended. So our priority themes there are around systems leadership, things that have come up already in today's session around collaboration, as Laura talked about. This will be your bread and butter, if you're a CLD worker, if you're an ESOL worker, collaboration. How we've been supporting improvement and professional learning in the sector. So that's been sort of things, if you think about, we've got, as I mentioned, we've got an Eso Leads Network, which I know many of you are involved in, or someone within your local authority or college will be involved in. We've got representation from all 32 local authorities, all the colleges over Scotland, as well as all the national bodies that are there supporting yourselves as practitioners. So we've got Pauline from the TECLA. We've also got national bodies represented such as the SQA and COSLA and these sorts of bodies. So they meet regularly. We've also been delivering a series of webinars, ESOL webinars in particular. What I've got on the last slide here is I've got links to the wakelets for the recordings to ESOL webinars if you've not managed to come along to any. They'll be there and you can see them and see the presenters, as well as a range of blogs and social media. And we've also got quite a unique role, and I'll just sort of gloss over the next two slides. We've got a really unique role in Education Scotland, I think, in that recognition of ESOL in a much wider context. So, for example, we've done quite a bit of work in the last year with our digital team. So maybe you've got families at home with young children, you've got ESOL learners with young children who've been thrown into the deep end like the rest of us with the learning at home, and just the added challenges of maybe English isn't your language at home. We've been doing some work and produced some webinars and recordings with our digital team around some of the free adaptive assistive technology that's there, but also through the platforms that the kids are using themselves, be it Glow, as well as arranging a sort of videos. So we've been doing that sort of work, as well as linking in nationally with our English as an additional language teams within Education Scotland, so those who are not only supporting the young people in school but training the EAL staff in school. So they've been sharing with us resources, webinars, etc. that we've been passing out to the sector. And what I'm going to do is just gloss over that, because you'll get links to all of this stuff sent out and all of these links. And just in the interest of time, just to move on to the last page, which are some resources that we're going to share out. So we've got a CLD COVID landing page where we are sharing, resources, guidance, almost like a one-stop shop for this year. We've got the professional learning blogs, as well as our Twitter that I'm sure are mentioned in each of your sessions. We've also got our ESOL waitlist. That link will take you to all of those, as I mentioned, the recordings, the resources. The sort of things to also flag up at this point are publications that we've done as an organisation around what Scotland learned. So that's stories from the last year. And I know there are quite a few West sound bites and stories in there, but just to take the opportunity to flag up to you some ESOL related examples that are there that aren't from the West. So for example, you've got Edinburgh City Council, who've created what's their English Snacks, which is a range of ESOL literacy soundbite videos on YouTube that are there, and the links are there to share with you. So I realised that was incredibly fast and incredibly quick. So Laura and Joanna, I hope that's okay. But as I say, we're sharing links with everybody. And if you have anything, my contact details will be on the slides as well.
Thanks, Lara. Dara, that was great. Loads of information there, folks. And as Dara said, we'll make sure that all the links are available for people to have a look at. We're aware we've hit you with a lot of information there, folks. So great that you're still with us.